It was chaos in Las Vegas as there were several incidents throughout the Grand Prix. It was a spectacle under the lights as F1 hosted a race on a Saturday night in an unusual change from the traditional race weekend schedule. It was a brilliant event and there's lots to talk about, so here's my 5 things we learned from the Las Vegas Grand Prix. My name's Andy and this is Behind the Drive. Ferrari suddenly has low tyre degradation. This season, Ferrari have been struggling to manage their tyre life. Most weekends, they lose their tyres before their rivals, but it seemed in Las Vegas, Leclerc was managing his tyres incredibly well. The Ferrari driver extended his stint on the medium tyre, having overtaken Verstappen on track with the Red Bull struggling with significant graining. This was an exciting point in the race. Verstappen was due to face his time penalty, and it looked like the Ferrari was quicker than the Red Bull. What followed was the second safety car, where the Ferrari team opted to not stop Leclerc, while both his rivals did stop. It's impossible to know whether Leclerc could have held on to the win had he stopped at the second safety car. He would have been under some pressure and perhaps one of the Red Bulls would have tried to stay out to take track position. But either way, it was a strong race from Ferrari and from Charles Leclerc in particular. I think he could have taken the win today if certain circumstances were different. And Ferrari are now just 4 points behind Mercedes with 1 race to go, and so it's going to be fascinating to see how that competition ends up for second in the Constructors' Championship. For me, Leclerc drove excellently in Las Vegas. He qualified on pole, he deserved to lead after the first lap, and then did an amazing job to keep up with Verstappen and not let the Dutchman drive off into the distance. In the end, Leclerc's final lap overtake on Sergio Perez was incredible to watch, and it was a testament to this circuit and how it allowed for overtaking at the end of the long straight. For me, it's clearly a green box for Leclerc, and it was a tremendous race for the Ferrari driver. A strategy race determined by incidents. It was a chaotic race in Vegas, with the first corner incident resulting in several cars ending up backwards, which built on what was already a mixed-up grid following qualifying. In a way, the starting order was similar to that of a reverse grid. Both Williams and the Alpine of Pierre Gasly, Bottas's Alfa Romeo and Magnussen's Haas made it through to the top 10 in qualifying, and it resulted in several faster cars working their way up the order and the other cars trying to hold on to secure some points. The race was to be determined by a few safety car incidents. An early safety car was caused by Lando Norris as he lost control of his McLaren. The drivers that stopped early seemed to have an advantage as they were holding excellent race pace on the hard compound tyre, and this is how Sergio Perez managed to get himself into the mix. The drivers out at the front then went for the one-stop strategy, which became a two-stopper at the point of the second safety car. This created slight tyre differentials between the top drivers, and in the end this made the difference with Leclerc losing out to Verstappen, who had the fresher tyres. There were overtakes up and down the order in Las Vegas, and the track allowed for overtaking, which was surprising for quite a few people. But these factors, in combination with the tyres being good but also tricky to manage in terms of temperature through the safety car periods, made for a brilliant Grand Prix. So for me, it's a green box for the fact that the race was so exciting, and this is something that I'm looking forward to seeing more of throughout the rest of the Las Vegas 10-year contract. Verstappen pushes the boundaries, but still takes the win. Verstappen has been very vocal throughout this weekend regarding the events surrounding the Grand Prix. There were a lot of gimmicks this weekend, with an opening ceremony and other events surrounding the weekend, plus the fact it was being held on a Saturday night. I don't think there's any need for Verstappen to be so frustrated with the organisers of the event. We could see from Miami that there was going to be a lot of these types of things, and I think that's absolutely fine. The attitude of the 26-year-old did seem to change through the weekend, and by the time of the checkered flag, the driver was even singing Elvis Presley on the radio, so I hope he'll maintain that attitude for this race into the future. The Dutch driver qualified third to start second on the grid following Sainz's penalty, and he went for it into turn 1 as he dived down the inside of Charles Leclerc. The move was opportunistic as he lunged down the inside, but then he forced Leclerc wide and even went off the track himself as he once again raced with an attitude of yield or we will crash. Leclerc did well to slow his Ferrari down well enough to get himself around the corner, and he clearly had enough control to avoid going wide into turn 1 had Verstappen not been there. The fact that Verstappen didn't hand the position back to the Ferrari driver straight away was rather disappointing. It was clear he made the overtake work off the circuit, and the move counted on Leclerc being a conscientious driver. The subsequent 5-second penalty did hurt Verstappen as he got held up by the backmarkers following his delayed pit stop, but it wasn't enough to stop the Dutchman from taking the win. Verstappen did race incredibly well from there. He was brave on making his moves and showing signs of why he's the world champion. But at the end of the day, the move from Verstappen into turn 1 was simply not good enough, and he needs to learn that this isn't the way to race in Formula 1, as it isn't good for the fans or the other drivers. So on the whole, for the race winner today, I'm going to give him an amber box. The Vegas race organisation needs some work. It was the first race in Las Vegas this weekend, and as you might expect, there were some teething issues with the racing this weekend. Formula 1 made a huge investment to bring the racing to the Las Vegas Strip on a Saturday night, but the weekend began with a disappointing FP1, which lasted just 8 minutes before a drain cover damaged the Ferrari of Carlos Sainz. The Spaniard lost his car down the straight as the drain cover came loose from the concrete, keeping it in the road, and damaged his floor and his power unit elements as well. With the replaced power unit parts, Sainz ended up receiving a 10-place grid drop. Something that feels wrong considering the drivers and teams should be able to race with confidence that the track is suitable for these cars. This isn't the first time where drains have caused issues in Formula 1 on street circuits. We've seen the same at both Monaco and Baku before, but you'd have thought that there would have been a way to learn from these issues and test to see if this could have been a problem. This is an inherent risk when you have a circuit that's specially built for Formula 1 and doesn't have any other racing on it throughout the weekend, but there should have been more to anticipate these potential problems, which is disappointing from my end. But what's more disappointing is what happened next for the fans at the circuit. The inevitable delay for FP2 resulted in the event being delayed with no certainty of when the track would be ready for the cars to return. The fans waited patiently for the event to resume, having been disappointed with just 8 minutes of running in FP1. But with it getting later and later, the fans were subsequently asked to leave the circuit at 1:30 AM, having waited for several hours already. And then FP2 resumed at 2:30 AM without any fans present. To leave the fans waiting for that long, only to ask them to leave the venue, is disappointing and not what you'd expect from Formula 1. Reportedly, the contracts of the team who were needed to manage the crowds and keep people safe had ended at that late time. The organisers were in a tricky situation. It would be difficult, if not impossible, to extend the contracts of these workers at such short notice. But this was something that could have been seen before 1:30 AM. Knowing that FP2 would not start for a long time, there was no need to keep the fans there waiting in that intermediate point. Thursday event ticket holders were not offered refunds, but have subsequently been offered $200 in credit to spend at the fan store, which feels rather insignificant compared to the potential value of the tickets that these fans have spent for what they've received. I wouldn't be surprised if we hadn't heard the end of this incident, with the fans remaining rightfully angry. This is something that Formula 1 can and should do better. In the end, the rest of the event seemed to be well run and the race itself was excellent with lots of overtaking. Admittedly, the surrounding elements were a bit overdramatic, but that's the spectacle that the organisers wanted to put together for their return to Vegas. For me, on the whole, it was a success for Formula 1 when you look at the whole weekend, but I do hope that they learn from the situation in FP1 and FP2 for future years. The drivers seem to be excited about the race and the challenge that this circuit posed, as well as the overtaking opportunities, but it's got to be a red box for the F1 organisers for their disappointing antics in the USA on Thursday night. Sergio Perez silences his critics. Sergio Perez had a tough qualifying in Las Vegas. He failed to make it into Q3 in what seemed like a mistake from the team to end his Q2 runs early, as he was in the garage as his rivals subsequently set faster lap times than him, with the track development being significant. The Mexican driver started from 11th, and he ended up at the back following the first lap with front wing damage. From there, he managed his race incredibly well, and very quickly got himself into a position where he was fighting with the top drivers. It was brilliant to see, and I think he's showing why he deserves his Red Bull seat for the future. It has to be said that I and many others have criticised Perez throughout this season, and there's no doubt that there are elements of Checo's 2023 year that haven't been good enough. But races like this show that he does have the skill needed to secure podiums and deliver for that team. Perez has now secured second in the drivers' standings, which becomes Red Bull's first 1-2 in the Drivers' Championship. It's been an unbelievable season for Red Bull, and Perez is doing enough at this point to ensure he can at least maintain that seat. Today was Perez's first podium finish since Italy earlier in the year, so it's been a long time coming for the Mexican driver. It's been a great race for him despite losing that spot at the end, so I think he deserves a green box for today. Honourable mentions. Esteban Ocon did a brilliant job today to take 4th position at the checkered flag. Both Alpines were in a great position through the Grand Prix, and it was a shame that they messed up the strategy with Pierre Gasly. Despite fighting with each other though, it was Ocon who took 4th position and had a great haul of points for the French team. Lance Stroll also deserves an honourable mention for what was a brilliant race in his Aston Martin. It was brilliant to see Stroll manage his race so well as he went from 19th on the grid to 5th at the finish. It was clearly a well-managed race in terms of the tyres for the Canadian driver. This is a couple of good races in a row for Lance Stroll, so it seems he's found something to make himself more comfortable in the car in recent times. It was a brilliant spectacle in Las Vegas, and it's great to see the racing be so positive with even a strategic battle for the race win. I think this race will be one that the drivers and fans will look forward to in the years to come.